The world was not always a place of paved paths, of glass barriers that hold the wind at bay, or of controlled climates where the turn of a dial summons a false spring. To understand the true history of the human form, we must first peel back the layers of our modern comfort, shedding the wool, the silk, and the synthetic armors we wear, until we stand naked in the mind's eye against the raw, unedited theater of deep time. Imagine, if you will, a landscape where the horizon is not a destination, but a predator, where the sky is a vast, unblinking eye that offers either life-giving radiation or a descent into a blue, bone-chilling void. We must travel back, far beyond the reach of written memory, beyond the first cities of Mesopotamia, beyond even the painted caves of the Dordogne, to an era where the sun was a fickle god and the wind carried the sharpened edge of 1,000 knives. This was the dawn of the Pleistocene, a world of shifting boundaries and immense geological patience, where the very earth seemed to breathe with the rhythm of the glaciers. In this primeval theater, our ancestors were not the masters of their environment, but its subjects, small, shivering figures huddled in the vastness of the Great Rift Valley. They lived in a state of perpetual negotiation with the elements, their survival balanced on the razor's edge of caloric math. In those days, to be cold was to be dying, and to be hungry was to be a ghost in waiting. There were no storehouses then, no granaries to guard against a lean season. There was only the immediate brutal reality of the hunt and the gather. But within this struggle, a miracle was being prepared in the silence of the genome. Before we had the loom to weave wool or the brick to trap heat, before we mastered the external flame that dances on the end of a torch, we had only the alchemy of our own flesh, in the silent, sun-drenched cradle of the African rift, where the heat shimmers off the acacia trees and the dust tastes of ancient minerals. A subtle shift in the code of life began to whisper. It was a change that did not manifest in the sharpening of a canine tooth or the thickening of a brow ridge. It was not an adaptation of bone or of keratin, but an adaptation of energy, a radical reimagining of how a living creature interacts with the sun. This was the birth of our metabolic heritage, a silent witness to every famine our ancestors outlasted. A golden reservoir of survival tucked neatly beneath the surface of the skin. We were beginning to develop the ability to store the sun's bounty, transforming the sugars of a scavenged fruit or the rich proteins of a rare kill into a stable, enduring currency. This was the first true architecture of the human form, a soft, insulating layer of adipose tissue that acted as a biological buffer between the spark of life and the indifferent chill of the void. We were becoming creatures capable of carrying our own summer within us, a portable hearth that burned slowly, invisibly, in the deep, quiet spaces of the body. Picture a small band of these early travelers, perhaps 2 million years ago, moving through the tall grasses of the savanna as the light begins to fail. The air, which had been a heavy, humid weight at noon, starts to thin and cool with terrifying speed. As the golden hour fades into a bruised purple twilight, the predatory world wakes up. The big cats, with their night vision and their silent paws, begin their patrol. Our ancestors have no claws to match them, no thick pelts to turn a blade of ice, and no burrows to hide their heat. They are vulnerable, exposed, and biologically expensive. Their brains, growing larger with every passing generation, are demanding masters. They consume 20% of the body's energy even while the spirit is at rest. To fuel this growing intelligence, the body had to find a way to bridge the gap between meals. It had to become a master of storage. This was the evolutionary duality of our species, the vulnerability of our naked skin, and the sophisticated strength of our internal fuel. As the night deepens, a mother settles into the crook of a tree or the lee of a rock, clutching her child. She feels the temperature drop, the dew settling like cold diamonds on her limbs. But beneath her skin, a quiet alchemy is taking place. The fats she consumed days ago, the rendered grease of a hippopotamus carcass found by the river, the oily crunch of a handful of termites, are being slowly dismantled by enzymes, releasing a steady stream of heat and life. She is not merely surviving the night, she is fueling the future. The fat she carries is more than just tissue. It is a sacred trust, a memory of past abundance held in reserve for this specific moment of scarcity. It is the reason her child's heart continues to beat with a steady, warm rhythm despite the rising damp. This soft, golden layer was our first defense against the darkness, a way to cheat the reaper when the berries withered and the herds moved on. In the silence of the primeval forest, this metabolic shift acted as a catalyst for a new kind of existence. Because we could store energy so efficiently, we could afford to wander. We were no longer tethered to a single grove of fruit trees that ripened all at once and then left us to starve. We could cross the desert, we could climb the mountain, and we could wait out the storm. This was the silent error in the code, a mutation that perhaps made a single ancestor slightly more efficient at processing insulin or slightly better at depositing lipids. In a world of abundance, such a trait might have gone unnoticed, a neutral quirk of the blood. But in the crucible of the Stone Age, it was the difference between a lineage that ended in the dust and one that inherited the earth. We are the descendants of the Thrifty, the children of those who could squeeze every last calorie out of a handful of roots and tuck it away for a rainy day. As the eons folded into one another, the environment began to demand even more of this internal hearth. The world was cooling. The great pulses of the ice ages were beginning to beat like a slow, glacial heart, pulling the moisture from the air and locking the north in a grip of permafrost. The green world was turning to white, and the forests of Africa were shrinking, replaced by vast, demanding grasslands. Our ancestors, pushed by hunger and pulled by curiosity, began to move. They stepped out of the tropical embrace and toward the edges of the world. They encountered the biting cold of the mountain passes and the relentless wind of the Eurasian steppes. In these new lands, the hearth within the marrow became our most prized possession. Consider the experience of a hunter in the middle of the Pleistocene winter, thousands of miles from the warmth of the rift. He is tracking a wounded deer through a landscape that is almost entirely devoid of color. The snow crunches under his calloused feet, a sound like breaking glass in the absolute silence of the tundra. He has not eaten in 3 days. In any other primate, the muscles would have long since withered, the coordination would have failed, and the core temperature would have plummeted. But our hunter is a master of the internal burn. His body has shifted into a state of deep ketosis, melting the stores around his midsection to keep his brain sharp and his limbs moving. He is burning the sun of last summer to survive the frost of this winter. This is the biography of the body, written in real time. His fat is the character that saves the day, the silent protagonist that refuses to let the flame go out. This adaptation came with a profound cost, a biological tax that we still pay today. To maintain these stores, the human body developed a complex and nearly unbreakable relationship with hunger. We evolved to crave the very things that would most easily become fat, the sweet, the fatty, the dense. In the Paleolithic, a beehive dripping with honey was not a treat. It was a life-saving miracle, a concentrated burst of liquid gold that could be stored as a week's worth of warmth. A fatty piece of mammoth meat was a treasure beyond reckoning. Our brains are still wired with the ancient fear of the Great Empty, the looming famine that haunted our ancestors for 2 million years. When we feel the pull of a high-calorie meal today, we are feeling a ghost limb of our evolution, a survival instinct that was forged in the fires of necessity and the ice of the tundra. Generations faded into dust, yet the trait remained, growing more refined, more entrenched in our biology. We developed different types of fat, the white fat for long-term storage, and the precious brown fat, rich in mitochondria, which can generate heat directly without the need for shivering. We see this brown fat most clearly in our infants, those tiny, vulnerable bundles of potential who cannot yet seek the fire or hunt the beast. They are born with a cape of brown fat between their shoulder blades, a biological heating pad that protects their vital organs from the shock of the cold world. It is a vestige of our time as creatures of the wild, a final gift from the ancestors who survived the trek across the Bering Land Bridge or the crossing of the Alps. But the story of our metabolism is not just a story of survival, it is a story of connection. This internal hearth allowed us to become the most social of creatures. Because we could store energy, we could afford to share it. A hunter who returned with a kill didn't have to consume the entire animal at once to prevent it from being stolen by scavengers. He could share the meat with the elderly, the injured, and the young, knowing that his own body would store the excess from his portion. The softness of the human form became a signal of communal success, a visual proof that the tribe was winning its war against the void. In the dark caves where the first fires were lit, the physical presence of fat on a person's body was a sign of health, of fertility, and of the ability to weather the coming dark. It was the first aesthetic of beauty, because it was the first aesthetic of survival. As we moved into the Neolithic, the era of the first farmers, the relationship changed again. We began to domesticate the very plants and animals that provided our fuel. We built granaries of stone to mimic the granaries of our flesh. We created the paved paths and controlled climates that we know today. But our bodies did not get the memo. Our cells are still living in the Pleistocene. They are still waiting for the mammoth to fail, for the berries to freeze, and for the wind to sharpen its knives. We carry our history with us in every cell, an ancient memory carved in bone and stored in adipose. We are the architects of a world of plenty, yet we are inhabited by spirits of scarcity. And so we stand here today, in the quiet of the modern night, perhaps sitting by a different kind of fire, the glow of a screen, or the warmth of a radiator. Yet, if you listen closely to the rhythm of your own breath, you can hear the echo of the African rift. You can feel the steady, silent work of the metabolic hearth that has never gone out. It is a sacred unveiling of our origins, a reminder that we are not separate from nature, but a profound expression of its ingenuity. We are the creatures who learned to carry the summer inside us, who turned a mistake in the genetic code into the mastery of a planet. As you drift towards sleep, let the knowledge of this ancient protection wash over you. You are warm, you are fed, and you are guarded by the wisdom of 1 billion ancestors who fought the cold so that you wouldn't have to. The hearth within the marrow continues to burn, a silent golden flame in the deep, quiet spaces of your being, waiting, always waiting, to see you through to the dawn. The world was changing, though the shift was so slow it could only be measured in the deepening of valleys and the slow, rhythmic pulse of the stars. In the great sun-drenched expanse of the African continent, the cradle had become crowded, and the horizon, that shimmering distant line where the sky meets the earth, began to pull at the spirits of the wandering tribes. They were creatures of the light, children of a tropical sun that beat with a steady, predictable heat. Their skin was accustomed to the heavy, humid embrace of the equator, and their days were measured by the movement of shadows beneath the acacia trees. But a restlessness had taken hold, a primal curiosity that whispered of lands beyond the heat, beyond the familiar, and into the blue mysteries of the north. As they began their long, slow migration, they were stepping into a grand experiment of the flesh. They were leaving behind the safety of the perennial summer to confront a world where the air could turn into a solid, biting thing, and where the sun would eventually retreat for months at a time, leaving only a cold, indifferent moon to watch over the frozen plains. Imagine the first bands of pioneers as they crested the ridges of the Levant, the gateway to a world they could not possibly have imagined. The air here was different. It was thinner, sharper, carrying the scent of pine and the distant metallic tang of ice. As the eons folded into one another, these wanderers moved deeper into the heart of Eurasia, stepping into lands where the shadows grew long and the air turned brittle. They were entering the Pleistocene, an epoch of giants and glaciers, where the very ground was often locked in a crystalline grip. For a naked ape, this was a death sentence. To move from the sweltering heat of the Rift Valley to the fog-drenched forests of what would become Europe was to challenge the very laws of biology. They had no thick woolly coats like the mammoth. They had no layers of blubber like the seals of the northern coasts. They were fragile, their skin thin and vulnerable to the sharpened edge of the wind. And yet, they did not perish. They did not retreat back to the warmth of the southern sun. Instead, they carried with them an ancient, silent mutation that was about to prove its worth in the most dramatic fashion. Deep within the silence of the genome, a subtle revolution was taking place. It was a change not of bone or tool, but of the very way the body understood the concept of fire. In the ancestral line, a silent error in the code of life had occurred, an accident of chemistry that allowed the body to distinguish between the fuel that powers the muscle and the fuel that generates the heat. This was the birth of brown fat, a specialized dark-colored tissue tucked in strategic alcoves of the body, nestled between the shoulder blades, surrounding the neck, and cradling the heart like a living heater. While the white fat we know today acts as a passive warehouse of energy, a bank account for future famines, the brown fat was something entirely different. It was an internal furnace, a biological engine that did not require movement to ignite. It did not need the frantic shiver of a muscle to create warmth. It burned through pure biological intent. It was as if the body had learned to bypass the machinery of the locomotive and go straight to the boiler, converting stored chemical energy directly into the infrared glow of life. Picture, if you will, a mother from one of these early wandering tribes, huddling in the lee of a limestone cliff as a Eurasian autumn descends. The year is perhaps 80,000 years ago, and the world is a place of shadows and damp. The sun has already dipped below the jagged horizon, and the temperature is falling with a speed that makes the breath mist in the air. The mother cradles her infant against her chest, seeking to share the meager warmth of her own skin. They are miles from any fire. Perhaps the wood was too wet to catch, or perhaps they are traveling light, hiding from the predators that roam the tall grass. As she sleeps, a deep-seated fear might have once taken hold, the fear that the cold would seep into the child's marrow and extinguish the tiny spark within. But as the frost begins to form on the edges of her furs, her brown fat awakens. Without her ever knowing it, in the deep, quiet spaces of her torso, the mitochondria within those specialized cells begin to roar. They are uncoupling the usual process of energy production, refusing to create the molecules that power movement, and instead releasing every bit of that energy as raw, radiant heat. This is the sacred task of the metabolism, a quiet revolution performing its duty in the dark. The infant, too, is born with a heavy coat of this magic tissue. Infants cannot shiver. They lack the muscle mass to generate heat through movement. Instead, they are born with a biological promise, a cape of brown fat that acts as a shield against the indifferent chill of the void. As the mother and child sleep in the rising damp of the primeval forest, they are being warmed by an internal flame that is older than the discovery of fire itself. They are no longer prisoners of the climate. They are travelers carrying their own summer stitched into their very flesh. This adaptation was the secret weapon that allowed a tropical primate to step into the domain of the mammoth and the cave lion. It was a biological shield that permitted us to endure the first shiver of our global expansion. But this mastery came with a duality, a cost that was etched into the very survival of the species. To maintain this internal furnace, we required a constant, high-quality intake of fuel. We could not survive on the sparse, fibrous diet of our forest-dwelling cousins. We needed the fats of the hunt, the oils of the sea, and the concentrated sugars of the earth. The brown fat was a luxury of the elite survivor, an expensive piece of equipment that demanded regular maintenance. This created a new kind of pressure on the human spirit, a drive to hunt, to innovate, and to seek out the most energy-dense resources the landscape could offer. The cold did not just change our bodies, it changed our minds. It turned us into strategists, into creatures who had to think 3 months ahead to ensure the furnace would not run cold. As the tribes moved further north, encountering the massive ice sheets that once covered half the world, the environment became a harsh schoolmaster. In the shadow of the glaciers, there was no room for error. The wind that whipped off the ice caps was a different kind of cold, a dry, soul-sucking vacuum that could freeze the blood in minutes. Here, the brown fat was supplemented by the first true inventions of the human intellect. We began to sew. We took the hides of the animals we had outsmarted and turned them into a second skin, a barrier of fur and leather that mimicked the protection we lacked. But even beneath the finest mammoth skin parka, the internal furnace remained the final line of defense. It was the silent witness to the nights spent huddled in the back of a cave, listening to the glaciers groan and crack in the distance. It was the reason we could wake up in the morning and find the strength to track a herd across the permafrost. The transition from the heat of the savanna to the chill of the north was not merely a physical journey. It was a transformation of our very identity. We became the apes of the ice, a lineage defined by our ability to thrive where others withered. We see this today in the way our bodies still react to the cold. When you step out into a winter morning and feel that sudden, sharp bracing in your chest, that is your ancient heritage speaking. It is the remnant of the brown fat, still tucked around your heart and neck, preparing to ignite. Though we have lived in heated homes for generations, the shiver of the migration is still written in our cells. We carry the genetic memory of Doggerland, that lost world beneath the North Sea where our ancestors once walked among the elk and the rhino in a landscape of mist and frost. We are the survivors of a long, cold road, and every beat of our warm hearts is a testament to the success of that ancient accidental mutation. Generations faded into dust, and the Great Migration eventually populated the furthest corners of the globe, from the wind-swept tip of South America to the frozen reaches of Siberia. In each of these places, the metabolic hearth was the invisible companion that made it possible. We were no longer bound by the geography of our birth. We had become a global species, a creature of every climate and every storm. This was the biological promise that the cold would not be the end of our story. It was a promise kept by the mother in the Eurasian forest, by the hunter on the Siberian steppe, and by the countless nameless individuals who carried the flame forward through the deepest nights of the Ice Age. As you lie in the stillness of your own room, feel the warmth radiating from your skin. That heat is not just a byproduct of being alive. It is a sacred inheritance. It is the hearth within the marrow, the portable summer that our ancestors fought for through eons of ice and shadow. You are the culmination of 1,000,000 nights spent in the cold, a living torch in a universe that is mostly void and frost. The first shiver of the migration has long since passed, but the fire it ignited still burns within you, a silent, metabolic lullaby that guards your sleep and fuels your dreams. We were never meant to be stationary. We were built to wander, protected by the golden alchemy of our own flesh, forever carrying the memory of the sun into the heart of the winter. The world of the Pleistocene was a theater of brutal, magnificent extremes, a place where the concept of enough did not exist. To understand the lineage of the human form, one must first visualize a landscape that was never static. A world where the green lushness of a river valley could, within a single season, turn into a skeletal wasteland of dust and parched bone. Imagine, if you will, the Great Rift Valley under a bruising purple twilight. The air is thick with the scent of drying sage and the distant metallic tang of ozone from a storm that will never break. Here, our ancestors moved not as masters, but as shadows, their lives governed by a rhythm of radical fluctuation. The sun was a relentless creditor, demanding moisture and energy with every hour it spent in the sky. In this primeval economy, survival was not merely a matter of strength or the sharpness of a flint blade. It was a game of biological accounting. It was a time of the Stone Age buffet, a phrase that sounds like abundance, but was, in reality, a desperate, sporadic feast, punctuated by the long, hollow silences of crushing famine. In this deep past, the landscape offered its gifts with a cruel, unpredictable hand. There were days of sudden, overwhelming windfall, a grove of wild figs ripening all at once, their skins bursting with syrupy heat, or the discovery of a fallen megafauna, a mountain of protein and marrow gifted by a lightning strike or a predator's abandonment. In those moments of glut, the air would be filled with the sound of frantic activity, the tearing of flesh, the rhythmic thud of stone against bone to reach the fatty treasures within. But these were the exceptions. The rule of the Pleistocene was the lean moon, the season where the tubers were buried beneath earth as hard as iron, and the herds had vanished into the shimmering heat of the horizon. To survive such a world, the human body had to become a meticulous treasurer. Those who survived the eons were not necessarily the swiftest runners or the most aggressive warriors, but those whose bodies possessed a silent, internal wisdom, the ability to hoard every excess gram of energy as if it were the most precious gold ever mined. This was the birth of a profound architecture within our flesh. In the silence of the genome, a silent error began to replicate, a mutation that favored the slow burn over the fast flash. We became masters of the lipid. Our biology learned to take the ephemeral sun, captured in the sugars of a fruit or the fats of a beast, and weave it into a semi-permanent form beneath our skin. This was the architecture of the buffet, a physical manifestation of a successful hunt. In the Stone Age, to be soft was not a sign of lethargy. It was a sign of preparation. A layer of subcutaneous fat was a biological shield, a buffer against the indifferent chill of the void and the hollow ache of the gut. It was a survival weapon more reliable than any spear, a reservoir of life that could be tapped when the world turned gray and the trees stood bare. We were becoming creatures stitched together by our own history of hunger, our silhouettes shaped by the famines we had outlasted. Picture a young woman of the Paleolithic, perhaps 30,000 years ago, standing on the edge of a drying lake bed in what is now the Sahara. The wind carries the grit of 1,000 miles of desert, stinging her eyes and coating her skin in a fine ochre dust. She has spent the day digging for tubers, her fingers raw from the abrasive soil. She finds a patch of wild melons, small and bitter, but laden with the water and sugar of the deep earth. As she eats, her body does not simply use the energy to power her walk back to the cave. Instead, her metabolism performs a sacred, ancient task. With a precision no modern accountant could match, her cells begin to partition the bounty. A small portion goes to the immediate needs of her heart and her searching brain, but the rest is diverted. It is converted, molecule by molecule, into the golden store of adipose tissue. As she walks, she can feel the weight of her own survival. She carries a child on her hip, a heavy, warm burden who relies entirely on the quality of her milk. This milk is not made from the food she finds today, but from the stores she laid down a month ago when the tribe found the carcass of a drowned buffalo. Her body is a time traveler, using the abundance of the past to fuel the life of the future. The fat on her thighs and her belly is not a blemish. It is a promise. It is the only thing standing between her child and the great sleep that claims the weak when the rains fail. In this moment, the Stone Age buffet is not a dream of gluttony, but a strategy of selfless preservation. This biological imperative created a hunger in us that was never truly satisfied, a drive etched into our neurons by the relentless pressure of selection. We developed a sensory map that prioritized the dense, the sweet, and the fatty. To an ancestor in the Great Rift, the smell of wood smoke and roasting fat was the most beautiful music ever composed. It was the signal that the debt of the body was being paid. We see the legacy of this today in our own cravings, those deep late-night pulls toward the rich and the caloric. We often mistake this for greed or a lack of will, but it is, in reality, a profound wisdom of the flesh. Your brain is still a Paleolithic organ, screaming at you to eat the marrow and the honey because it remembers a world where such things were the difference between seeing the spring and becoming part of the permafrost. Consider the texture of flint against the palm, the way a hunter's hand grows steady as he approaches a kill. He is not just hunting for meat, he is hunting for time. A single kill provides the caloric density to buy the tribe another week of existence, another week to think, to paint on the walls of a cave, to tell the stories of the stars. The cost of our large inquisitive brains was a metabolic tax that could only be paid in the currency of high-grade fat. If we had remained lean, grazing primates, we would never have had the surplus energy to invent language or contemplate the divine. Our intellect is a byproduct of our ability to get fat. We traded the constant low-level digestion of the leaf eater for the high-risk, high-reward strategy of the predator and the hoarder. We became metabolic gamblers, betting that we could find enough during the feast to bridge the gap of the famine. Generations faded into dust, but the trait remained, becoming more entrenched as the ice began its final retreat. During the Neolithic Revolution, when we first began to settle and tame the earth, our relationship with the buffet changed, but our biology remained stubbornly ancient. We built fences and tilled soil, creating a world of predictable calories, yet the thrifty gene continued its work. It continued to hoard, to save, and to prepare for a winter that, in our modern heated homes, never truly arrives. We carry the equipment of the famine survivor into a world of endless harvest, a duality that creates a new kind of struggle in our modern age. But as you lie here in the stillness, do not view this ancient hoarding as a flaw. Instead, see it as a silent witness to the tenacity of your lineage. Every cell in your body is a descendant of a survivor who refused to starve. You are the product of 1,000,000 successful Stone Age buffets, the heir to a biological fortune that was saved gram by gram through the harshest winters of the Pleistocene. Your body still knows how to protect you, how to buffer you against the void, and how to carry the sun of 1,000 summers stitched into your very skin. The grass may wither and the herds may move on, but the hearth within you continues to burn, fueled by the ancient wisdom of a flesh that remembers how to stay alive. Rest now, knowing that your body is a master of survival, a meticulously crafted vessel designed to weather the leanest moons. The great sleep of the ancestors was a fear, but for you, it is a grace, a time for the metabolic accountant to balance the books while you dream of the green world and the returning sun. The world was not merely cold, it was becoming a kingdom of silence, a vast, crystalline theater where the very breath of the earth seemed to freeze in midair. Imagine, if you will, the descent of the Great Ice Age, not as a sudden storm, but as a heavy, unrelenting curtain of white that fell across the northern reaches of the globe over the course of centuries. The familiar green belts of the Eurasian forests, once teeming with the soft rustle of deciduous leaves and the hum of insects, began to shudder and retreat. In their place came the permafrost, a ground so hard it rang like iron beneath the foot, and the tundra, a landscape of mosses and lichens that shivered under a sky the color of a bruised plum. This was a world of deep time and ancient mystery, where the sun became a pale, distant ghost, and the wind learned to howl with the sharpened edge of 1,000 flint knives. To enter this domain was to enter a crucible of biological wonder, a place where the human spirit was tested not by the heat of the hunt, but by the slow, creeping lethargy of the absolute zero. As the glaciers pushed southward, grinding mountains into dust and locking the world's water in their blue, translucent hearts, the sea levels began to fall. Hidden worlds emerged from the depths, vast land bridges like Beringia and Doggerland, stretching out like skeletal fingers to connect continents. To cross these bridges and navigate the tundra, our ancestors required more than just the mastery of fire or the stitching of fur. They required a radical reimagining of the human silhouette. The body, that ancient and faithful traveler, had to find a way to become its own fortress. It had to look inward, transforming its very chemistry to survive a reality where the ambient temperature was a constant predator, seeking to steal the warmth from the blood. This was the birth of our own Antarctica, a period of extreme selection where the human form was refined by the frost, and where the silent errors in our genetic code became the blueprints for our survival. In the silence of the Pleistocene night, a nomad stands at the edge of a frozen river, looking toward a horizon that has not seen the sun in weeks. The air is so brittle it feels as though it might shatter. He is wrapped in the hides of a reindeer, yet he can feel the cold searching for a weakness in the seams. But beneath the leather and the hair, a miracle of adaptation is unfolding. His body, sensing the lethal drop in pressure and temperature, has begun to prioritize the protection of the core. In a desperate, elegant maneuver of survival, the peripheral blood vessels constrict, drawing the warm, life-sustaining blood away from the vulnerable skin and deep into the sanctuary of the torso. He feels his fingers grow numb, his toes lose their sensation, but his heart, his lungs, and his liver remain bathed in a constant 37-degree heat. This is the first sacrifice of the ice, the surrender of the extremities to ensure the survival of the center. Yet, vasoconstriction alone was not enough to cross the continents. To truly inhabit the ice, the body had to develop a new kind of armor, one that was grown, not worn. Over generations of wandering through the biting mists, the layer of subcutaneous fat began to thicken, responding to a subtle shift in the code of life that commanded the body to mimic the blubber of the sea creatures we would eventually learn to hunt. This fat was no longer just a warehouse for calories. It became a sophisticated insulation, a thermal barrier that slowed the escape of heat into the hungry air. This was the biography of the body, written in lipids, a character that grew denser and more resilient with every crossing of a mountain pass. It changed the way we looked and the way we moved. The lean, lanky proportions of our African ancestors, designed to dissipate heat under a tropical sun, were traded for a more compact, rounded geometry. We became shorter, our limbs more tucked, our surface area minimized to keep the inner flame from flickering out. Picture a young woman, 30,000 years ago, huddled in the mouth of a cave in the foothills of the Urals. Outside, the blizzard is a roaring wall of white, burying the tracks of the elk and the mammoth. She has not eaten a substantial meal in many days, her tribe living off the meager scrapings of dried meat and frozen berries. As she sleeps, her body is performing a sacred metabolic task. Because she carries this thickened layer of adipose tissue, her core temperature remains stable even as the cave walls grow a skin of hoarfrost. Her fat is her silent witness, a reservoir of summer sun captured months ago, now being slowly, meticulously burned to keep her heart beating through the longest night of the year. This is the evolutionary duality of the ice. The vulnerability of our nakedness balanced by the incredible cost of our internal fuel. To stay warm, she must consume a staggering amount of calories, yet to find those calories, she must venture into the very cold that seeks to kill her. This period was one of immense sacrifice. The metabolic cost of staying alive was so high that every other function of the human animal became secondary to the maintenance of the internal hearth. In the deep winter of the Paleolithic, the body would often shut down non-essential systems. Growth slowed, fertility was postponed. The very pace of life settled into a hypnotic, low-frequency hum. We were learning the art of the huddle, the deep-seated impulse to conserve every joule of energy, to pull our knees to our chests and wait for the light. We see the legacy of this time even today, in the way our spirits seem to dim as the days shorten, and in that ancient, irrepressible urge to seek comfort and store up as the first frosts of autumn touch the windows. It is a biological memory of the tundra, a vestige of the era when the shortening of the days was a signal that the great hunger was returning. Deep within the marrow and the tissues of these Ice Age survivors, another adaptation was being polished by the hand of necessity. The brown fat we carry between our shoulder blades, that specialized furnace that burns without shivering, became our primary defense against the sudden drop in temperature. It was a silent error that saved us, a mutation that allowed us to generate heat through non-shivering thermogenesis. Imagine an infant born in a hide-covered tent on the edge of the mammoth steppe. The child cannot move to stay warm. It cannot gather wood for the fire. But as the cold seeps through the furs, the brown fat around its heart and neck ignites. It is a biological promise, a hidden flame that ensures the next generation survives the passage through the ice. We are the descendants of those who could endure the longest nights on the thinnest of margins, those whose bodies were the most efficient at turning the fats of the reindeer and the seal into the radiant heat of consciousness. As the eons folded into one another and the ice began its final agonizingly slow retreat, we emerged from the frost as a different kind of being. We had crossed the bridges of ice, and in doing so, we had crossed a threshold in our own evolution. We were no longer just tropical primates. We were the masters of the cold, creatures of the huddle and the hearth. The Antarctica of our past had refined us, carving away the unnecessary and leaving behind a form that was built for endurance. We carry this history in the curve of our hips, in the way our bodies react to a cold breeze, and in the deep, quiet spaces of our metabolism. Generations faded into dust, the glaciers melted into the rising seas, and the land bridges of Doggerland and Beringia were swallowed by the waves, becoming the stuff of myth and sunken memory. Yet the trait remained. It remained in the way we still crave the rich, fatty foods that once fueled the internal furnace of the tundra. It remained in the way our bodies meticulously hoard energy, still waiting for the day the green world turns to white. We are the architects of a modern world where the cold is an inconvenience, yet we are inhabited by the ghosts of survivors for whom the cold was a god. Rest now in the warmth of your bed and feel the steady rhythm of your heart. That warmth is not a small thing. It is a miracle of deep time. It is the heat of 1,000 ancestors who slept in the snow so that you might wake in the light. You are the product of the bridge of ice and adipose, a living testament to the sacrifice of the Paleolithic. As you drift into the quiet dark, know that you carry within you a portable summer, an ancient, unwavering flame that has survived the harshest winters the earth has ever known. The long night of the ice is over, but the light it forced us to carry still burns, bright and steady, in the silence of your cells. The world was once a place of terrifying silence, a vast expanse of emerald and gold, where the only currency that mattered was the spark of life itself. To understand the profound mystery of the human mind, we must first look away from the stars and down into the very tissues of the body, into the quiet, pulsing regions where energy is bartered and stored. Imagine, if you will, the Great Rift Valley 2 million years ago, a landscape of shifting shadows and sudden violent light. Here, our ancestors moved with a newfound grace, their forms beginning to change in ways that defied the standard laws of the primate world. While our cousins in the trees remained lean, constant burners of energy, tethered to the immediate availability of fruit and leaf, a different kind of destiny was being woven into our own biology. We were entering into a sacred economy, a radical reimagining of the body's internal ledgers. It was a time of deep time and biological wonder, where the silent errors in the code of our metabolism were preparing to fund the most expensive luxury the natural world had ever seen, the human brain. As our bodies grew more adept at managing energy, as we mastered the art of hoarding the sun's bounty within the golden reservoirs of our fat, a strange and wonderful thing happened. We began to afford a larger, hungrier consciousness. The human brain is a demanding master, a gray, convoluted character with a history of insatiable appetite. It is a biological paradox, comprising only a small fraction of our total weight, yet consuming a staggering 20% of our daily energy. Even when we are lost in thought, even when we are drifting in the shallow waters of a dream, the brain never sleeps. It demands a constant, unwavering stream of glucose and oxygen. In the harsh reality of the Pleistocene, such a demanding organ should have been an evolutionary death sentence. Without our advanced ability to store and regulate fat, the complex neural networks that allow us to contemplate the stars or weave the first languages would have been a physical impossibility. Our fat was not a burden. It was the battery for the most sophisticated computer in the known universe. Consider the life of a young father in the dawning Neolithic, standing on the edge of a world that is beginning to change. The air smells of wood smoke and the sharp metallic tang of the coming rain. He spends his days in a state of high-stakes caloric math. To hunt the fleet-footed gazelle or to dig for the hidden sugars of the earth requires a massive expenditure of physical energy, yet his brain is constantly running in the background, calculating the path of the sun, remembering the location of a distant spring, and decoding the subtle social cues of his tribe. He is a traveler between two worlds, the world of the muscle and the world of the mind. Every successful hunt, every handful of calorie-dense marrow he consumes is a deposit into a biological trust fund. His body takes that windfall and, through the alchemy of the liver and the blood, transforms it into a steady, reliable current of energy that keeps the fires of his intellect burning. He is a metabolic gambler, trading the raw power of the ape for the quiet, calculating brilliance of the man. This was a beautiful, invisible trade-off, a sacred economy that rewrote the destiny of our species. We traded the lean, muscular efficiency of our primate cousins for a more rhythmic, storative system. Our cousins, the chimpanzees and gorillas, are masters of the immediate. They possess incredible physical strength, yet their brains are limited by the fact that they cannot easily store the energy required to grow a larger neocortex. They are prisoners of the now, forced to spend their days in a constant cycle of foraging. But we, through an ancient accident in our metabolic code, developed the ability to carry our own fuel. Our hips and bellies became the silent partners of our prefrontal cortex. The softness of the human form served as the protective casing for the sharpest weapon in nature. We became the only creatures on Earth who could starve for weeks and yet still possess the mental clarity to plan, to hope, and to invent. Picture a child in a Paleolithic camp, sitting by the embers of a fire as the shadows of the cave walls dance and stretch. The child is learning her first words, repeating the sounds of her mother's voice. This simple act, the mapping of a sound to a meaning, is a metabolic miracle. It requires the firing of billions of synapses, a microscopic firestorm of activity that demands a precise and constant flow of energy. As she learns, her body is utilizing the energy that her ancestors fought to preserve. The fats her father brought home from the hunt, the gathered oils from a summer's harvest of nuts, these are being burned at the altar of her education. Our intelligence is, in a very real sense, a gift from our metabolism, a harvest of ancient calories transformed into the light of reason. Every time an elder remembers a path through the mountains or an artist mixes ochre to mark the wall of a cavern, they are spending the currency that was saved through eons of hardship. As the ice retreated and the first cities began to rise from the dust of Mesopotamia, this economy only grew more complex. We began to domesticate the world to feed our brains. But deep within the marrow, the old rules still applied. The biography of the body tells us that we are still the same creatures who wandered the Rift Valley, still governed by the need to buffer our fragile, expensive minds against the threat of scarcity. This is the duality of our existence. We are the masters of the planet because we learned how to be efficiently soft. We carry the legacy of the Stone Age buffet in our very cells, a reminder that every thought we have is a luxury paid for by the resilience of our ancestors. The brain, our silent protagonist, continues to dream of the future, while the body, our meticulous accountant, continues to hoard the remnants of the past. Generations faded into dust, yet the trait remained, the rhythmic, storative system that allows us to breathe life into our ideas. We are the descendants of those who could maintain the inner flame of consciousness on the thinnest of margins. As you lie here in the stillness of the night, listen to the quiet work of your own biology. Even now, as your muscles relax and your breath slows, your brain is busy, sifting through the memories of the day, repairing the architecture of your mind. It is fueling itself from the stores you have built, a portable summer burning in the dark. Your intelligence is not a separate thing. It is a manifestation of your body's incredible history, a sacred flame fed by the alchemy of your own flesh. The long journey from the savannah to the stars was paved with the calories our ancestors refused to waste. It was a story of survival, of sacrifice, and of the profound connection between the fuel of the earth and the light of the mind. Rest now, knowing that you are the heir to this sacred economy. Your thoughts, your dreams, and your very sense of self are the beautiful byproducts of 1,000,000 years of metabolic wisdom. The hearth within the marrow has given rise to the light of reason, and as you sleep, the furnace of your mind continues to glow, guarded by the ancient treasure of your own survival. The world was once a place of terrifying, beautiful uncertainty, a landscape where the rhythm of life was dictated by the long, hollow silences between feasts. To understand the profound resilience of the human form, we must travel back beyond the noise of our current century, past the industrial smoke and the tilled fields of the first farmers, into the deep breathing shadows of the primeval forest. Imagine, if you will, the world as it existed in the soft green light of the Miocene, or the shifting golden dust of the early Pleistocene. It was a theater of giants and ghosts, where the sun was a fickle benefactor, and the rain was a traveler who often forgot the way home. In this ancestral theater, a specific set of instructions was being polished by the hand of time, a delicate, invisible script written into the very foundation of our cells. These are what we now call the Thrifty genes, but to our ancestors, they were something far more sacred. They were a biological promise, a silent, internal guardian that whispered to the flesh, "Hold on, do not let go, prepare for the empty months." This was the birth of our most enduring character, the hoarder, a genetic protagonist that would ensure our survival through the darkest chapters of our species' biography. In the quiet of that primeval world, the air carried the scent of wet earth and the musk of predators lurking just beyond the firelight. Here, the silent errors in the code of life began to weave a new destiny for a small, upright primate. While other lineages relied on the brute strength of muscle or the specialized speed of the hoof, our ancestors began to specialize in the art of the weight. A mutation, a tiny shift in how our bodies processed the sugars of a wild berry or the fats of a scavenged kill, began to take root. It was an ancient accident that rewrote our destiny, commanding the body to treat every calorie not as something to be spent, but as something to be invested. This was the wisdom of the Thrifty gene, a metabolic strategy that favored the efficient over the extravagant. For thousands of years, these genes acted as our guardian angels, watching over the tribe with a vigilance that never slept. They ensured that when the monsoon failed to arrive and the great rivers of the Serengeti became nothing but cracked, white clay, the human spirit would not flicker out like a candle in a draft. Picture, if you will, a specific night in the Great Rift Valley, 300,000 years ago. The sky is a vast indigo vault, speckled with stars that have no names. A small band of humans is huddled together beneath the shelter of an overhanging rock. They have not eaten a substantial meal in 10 suns. The tubers they rely on have rotted in the parched earth, and the herds of wildebeest have migrated far to the south, chasing the scent of a rain that exists only as a memory. Among them is a young man, lean and dust-covered, whose body carries the perfected script of the Thrifty gene. While his companions grow lethargic and their pulses slow to a dangerous rhythm, his metabolism is performing a masterpiece of conservation. His cells have entered a state of profound biological economy. His insulin levels are low, his liver is carefully rationing the last of his glucose for his brain, and his body is slowly, meticulously dismantling the fat stores he built during the last great windfall of the summer. He is a survivor of the Great Empty, a creature designed to endure a drought that might last a generation. The evolutionary duality of this trait is a study in survival versus vulnerability. The cost of this thriftiness was a body that was perpetually on edge, a biology that lived in a state of post-traumatic stress from famines it hadn't even experienced yet. To have the Thrifty gene meant that the body was always preparing for the worst, even in times of plenty. Every time this young man found a beehive dripping with liquid gold or the carcass of a fallen antelope, his genes would scream at him to eat until the point of pain. It was not greed, it was a profound, visceral wisdom. The body knew that this abundance was a lie, a temporary glitch in a world of scarcity. The cost was a brain wired for a hunger that could never truly be satisfied, but the survival was the ability to walk across a desert that would kill a lion, to carry a child across a mountain range where the air was too thin for the wolf, and to survive the bone-chilling winters in the caves of Lascaux. Generations faded into dust, yet the genetic legacy remained, a map of every hardship our lineage ever faced. It is a record written in the chemical signatures of our blood, a chronicle of the winters where the ice sheets pushed so far south that the world became a white void, and the droughts where the only water was the blood of the animals we followed. When we look at our own bodies in the mirror today, we are looking at a living museum of survival. We carry the physical equipment of a long-distance runner, the upright posture, the cooling sweat, the spring in the arch of the foot. But we also carry the storage capacity of a desert nomad. We are a single, elegant form that was designed to never, ever give up on the hope of tomorrow's meal. We are the architects of our own endurance, wrapped in a skin that remembers the hunger of 1,000 years. Consider a woman of the Neolithic, the era of the first great transition. She lives in a world where the wild grasses are being tamed into wheat and the wild sheep into flocks. For the first time in the biography of our body, food is becoming predictable. The great empty seems to be receding. And yet, as she tills the soil with a sharpened piece of flint, her thrifty genes are still at work. She feels a deep, ancestral pull to save the best of the harvest for herself and her kin. When the harvest is good, her body stores the excess with the same ferocity as her ancestors did in the Paleolithic. She does not know that the silos are full. Her cells only know that the winter is coming. This is the biography of the body as a character with a long memory. The gene does not care about the invention of the plow or the granary. It only cares about the next famine, the one it is certain is hiding just over the horizon of time. The sensory details of this survival are etched into our very being. The crunch of dry leaves underfoot, the smell of wood smoke that signals the safety of the hearth, the texture of a sun-dried fruit. These are the signals that once told our genes that the bank account was being replenished. In the silence of the primeval forest, these sensations were the music of life. But as the eons rolled on and we stepped out of the forest and onto the paved paths of the modern world, the music began to clash with the environment. We are now travelers, carrying a hidden flame through a world where the fire is always lit. We live in a landscape of infinite Stone Age buffets, yet our thrifty genes are still sounding the alarm of the great empty. This is the modern struggle. We are the descendants of the ultimate survivors, equipped with the most sophisticated hoarding machinery in the natural world, now living in a time where the hoarding itself has become a risk. Scientific discovery tells us that these genes are not a single point in our DNA, but a complex choir of instructions, a silent error that turned out to be a masterwork. They govern how we store fat, how we burn sugar, and how we feel satiety. In the lab, we see them as dry sequences of proteins and acids, but in the narrative of our species, they are the scars of our history. They are the biological echoes of the mothers who shared their last morsels with their children, and the hunters who walked for days on nothing but water and will. They are the reason you are here today. If your ancestors had been wasteful with their energy, if they had burned through their calories with the reckless abandon of a hummingbird, they would have vanished in the first great frost or the first long drought. You are the child of the thrifty, the heir to a fortune of biological resilience. As the ice retreated and the forests returned, as Doggerland was swallowed by the sea and the Great Rift Valley became a cradle for civilizations, the thrifty gene remained the silent witness to our progress. It watched as we built the pyramids, as we sailed the oceans, and as we eventually reached for the stars. Each step of that journey was powered by the calories our genes refused to let go of. Our intelligence, our culture, and our art are all luxuries funded by this ancient hoarding. We are a species that can afford to think because we know how to save. The sacred economy of the brain we discussed before is only possible because the wisdom of the thrifty gene provides the treasury. As you drift now toward the edges of sleep, feel the weight of your own body against the mattress. That weight is not a burden. It is a legacy. It is the equipment of a survivor, a physical manifestation of the fact that your ancestors never gave up. In the quiet of the night, your metabolism is still following the ancient instructions. It is tending the fire, rationing the fuel, and preparing you for a tomorrow that it assumes will be hard. Let the calm, rhythmic pulse of your heart be a lullaby, a reminder that you are guarded by a biological wisdom that is older than language. The great empty of the past is gone, but the guardian who saw us through it is still here, tucked into the marrow and the blood, ensuring that the flame of your life continues to burn, steady and bright, until the sun returns to the sky. The world of the deep past was a landscape of relentless tension. a theater where the air itself seemed to vibrate with the frequency of the hunt and the perpetual threat of the void. Imagine, if you will, the twilight of a prehistoric evening on the edge of the great mammoth steppe. The sun, a cold and distant coin, has slipped beneath a horizon of jagged ice, leaving behind a sky stained with the bruised purples and deep indigos of a world that does not know the concept of mercy. The wind, a nomadic traveler from the northern glaciers, whistles through the tall, dry grasses, carrying with it the scent of frozen earth and the musk of predators that move like shadows through the dark. In this ancient world, the baseline of human existence was one of heightened alertness, a neurological state where the heart beat fast and the eyes searched the periphery for the slightest flicker of movement. To survive was to be in a state of constant low-level emergency. But within this symphony of survival, there existed a hidden melody, a quiet chemical bridge that allowed the human spirit to find its way back to the shores of tranquility. Deep within the dark, liquid spaces of our physiology, a character was born to act as the ultimate mediator between the flesh and the spirit. This is the hormone we now call leptin, but in the biography of the body, it is known as the silent messenger, the architect of peace. It is a chemical whisper that travels through the crimson rivers of our veins, carrying a message of profound importance from the golden storehouses of our fat to the high command of the brain. While the thrifty genes were busy hoarding the sun's bounty, leptin was the one tasked with announcing when the treasury was full. In the ancient world, this was the signal of the great reprieve. When leptin levels rose, drifting into the hypothalamus like wood smoke into a high mountain pass, the brain received a sacred notification. The tribe is safe. The stores are sufficient. The war against the great empty has been won, if only for a night. This was the biological equivalent of a sigh of relief, a chemical lullaby that allowed a high-strung, vulnerable primate to finally lower its guard. Picture, if you will, a campsite nestled in the lee of a granite cliff in the Dordogne Valley, some 40,000 years ago. The air is crisp, biting at the edges, but the center of the camp is dominated by the orange, flickering heart of a great fire. The hunt has been successful. A reindeer, thick with the fats of the summer tundra, has been brought down, and its various parts have been shared among the kin. There is the rhythmic sound of grease dripping onto hot coals, a hiss that to the Paleolithic ear was more beautiful than any song. As the members of the tribe eat, their bodies are not merely processing calories, they are engaging in a radical shift of consciousness. As the adipose cells begin to fill, they secrete leptin into the blood. This molecule travels upward, crossing the blood-brain barrier, and finds its way to the ancient centers of the mind that govern hunger, fear, and desire. As the signal reaches its destination, the narrator of the body changes its tone. The frantic drive to search and scavenge begins to dissipate. The cortisol, that sharp-edged chemical of stress, retreats into the shadows. A sense of profound well-being and security washes over the collective consciousness of the group. This was the origin of our modern association between food and comfort, a deep-seated neurological link that dates back to the very dawn of our species. It was a sacred cycle of effort and reward, a rhythm that allowed us to find moments of grace in a world that was often harsh and unforgiving. Without this signal, we would have been creatures of infinite neurotic movement, unable to ever stop, unable to ever dream. Leptin was the hormone that gave us the permission to be still. Consider the experience of an elder sitting by that fire. For days he has been on the move, his joints aching with the damp of the Pleistocene, his mind occupied by the logistical nightmare of keeping his family alive. His body has been under the tyranny of ghrelin, the hunger hormone, which barks orders like a desperate general. But now, with a belly full of marrow and a heart warmed by the hearth, the leptin signal takes hold. Suddenly, his mind is free to wander away from the immediate problem of meat. He begins to look at the cave wall, seeing in the flickering shadows the shapes of the spirits. He reaches for a piece of charred wood and begins to draw. This is the evolutionary duality of our metabolism. Our fat stores do not just fuel our muscles, they buy us the time to be human. The lullaby of the leptin signal is what allowed us to become artists, storytellers, and philosophers. It provided the biological safety net required for the brain to move from the mode of survival to the mode of creation. This chemical whisper regulated the very tempo of human life, dictating when we should roam and when we should settle. In the vastness of the Great Migration, when the tribes moved beyond the familiar heat of the equator, the leptin signal was the compass of the spirit. It told the wanderers when they had found a land of enough. When the signal remained low for too long, it was a biological command to keep moving, to find a valley where the game was more plentiful or the roots more succulent. But when the signal rose, it was the voice of the home fire. It commanded the tribe to build more permanent shelters, to invest in the community, and to begin the long, slow work of culture. We are the descendants of those who listened to this rhythm, those who knew how to balance the fire of the hunt with the peace of the feast. And as the eons folded into one another, this signal became a character with its own memories and its own struggles. In the silence of the genome, the silent errors that governed our sensitivity to leptin were being tested. Some lineages were too sensitive, stopping their search for food too early, before the treasury was truly full. They vanished during the first long winter. Others were resistant, never feeling the lullaby, never finding the peace to rest. They burned out in a frenzy of perpetual movement. We are the survivors of the middle path, the children of the chemical Goldilocks zone. We carry the heritage of those who could feel the sigh of relief in their very marrow. This is the biography of the body as a balanced ledger, a story of a molecule that learned how to tell the mind that it was okay to sleep. Day in the life of a Neolithic woman 7,000 years ago, as she sits among the first harvested grains of the Levant. The world is transitioning from the wild to the tilled. She has spent the afternoon grinding emmer wheat, her shoulders burning with the repetitive labor. But as the sun sets and she shares a bowl of pottage with her children, she feels the leptin rise. It is the same signal her ancestors felt on the savannah, but here it carries a new weight. It is the signal of the first stability. As the lullaby of the hormone washes over her, she doesn't think of the hunt. She thinks of the next season. She thinks of the songs she will teach her daughter. The leptin signal provides the neurological space for the invention of the future. It is the chemical foundation of hope. However, this adaptation carried an invisible cost, a vulnerability that would only reveal itself in the distant future. Because the leptin signal was so synonymous with survival and safety, our brains developed an immense craving for the state of being leptin high. We evolved to seek out the security of the full storehouse with a desperate intensity. In a world of scarcity, this was a perfect mechanism. But in the silence of the modern age, where the Stone Age buffet is available at every corner, the signal has become confused. We are now travelers who have found an infinite land of enough, yet we are still listening for the lullaby that tells us we are safe from the famine. We seek the comfort of the meal not because we are hungry, but because our ancient brains are searching for that chemical sigh of relief, that fleeting moment of Paleolithic peace. Generations faded into dust, the great ice sheets melted, and the mammoth became a ghost of the tundra. Yet the leptin signal remained. It remained through the rise and fall of empires, through the Industrial Revolution, and into the neon glow of the 21st century. It is the silent messenger that still dictates your mood after a long day, the reason why a warm meal feels like a sanctuary. When you sit down to eat after a period of stress, you are reenacting a ritual that is millions of years old. You are inviting the leptin to cross the threshold of your mind and tell the ancient, fearful parts of your brain that the wolves are far away and the fire is high. As you lie here now, in the stillness of the night, your body is continuing this ancestral conversation. Your adipose cells are quietly reporting to your brain, providing a status update on the state of your reserves. If you feel a sense of calm, a slowing of the heart, a readiness for the great sleep, it is because the lullaby is working. You are being cradled by a chemical tradition that saw our species through the darkest nights of the Pleistocene. You are safe. The stores are full. The horizon can wait until the sun returns. Rest in the knowledge that your body is not a machine, but a living history, a vessel for 1,000,000 years of successful peacemaking. The silent messenger has done its work for the day. Let the rhythm of your metabolism be your guide into the world of dreams, where the hunt is over and the spirit is free to wander the high, starlit paths of the mind. The fire is low, the belly is full, and the lullaby is singing you into the deep, quiet spaces of the night. The world as we know it has become a sanctuary of glass, steel, and perpetual light. A landscape so far removed from the raw, unedited theater of the Pleistocene that it seems a different planet entirely. Imagine, if you will, the perspective of a traveler from the deep past, one who walked the dust of the Great Rift Valley or navigated the mist-choked marshes of Doggerland. To them, our modern existence would appear as a paradise of impossible, even terrifying abundance. The Antarctica of our evolutionary history, the brutal, bone-chilling cycles of ice and scarcity, has been replaced by the climate-controlled glow of the modern city, where the seasons are merely a decorative backdrop to a life of sedentary comfort. But this world of plenty is a thin veneer, a recent mask placed over a biological face that has remained unchanged for hundreds of thousands of years. Beneath our layers of synthetic cloth and our sophisticated digital lives, our bodies are still waiting for the frost. We are ancient souls inhabiting a future we were never designed to see, carrying within us a metabolic machinery that is perpetually bracing for a famine that never arrives. This is the vestige of the hunter-gatherer, a silent biological ghost that dictates our desires and shapes our forms. A character whose history is a record of 1,000,000 winters we have long since forgotten. In the silence of our cells, a drama is unfolding that dates back to the dawn of our species. The very traits that acted as our guardian angels during the Great Ice Age, the relentless drive to seek out energy, the meticulous efficiency of our storage systems, the tenacity of the thrifty genes, have become our modern legacy. A mismatch between an ancient biological wisdom and a current environment of excess. We are like grand oak-ribbed ships built to withstand the heaviest, most mountainous seas of the North Atlantic, now found floating in the still, glassy waters of a calm and endless harbor. The hull is strong, the ballast is heavy, and the sails are rigged for a gale that no longer blows. This is not a flaw in our design, nor is it a failure of our will. It is a vestige of a time when every extra gram of energy held beneath the skin was a sacred insurance policy against the dark. It is a reminder that we are, in our hearts and in the very marrow of our bones, still the children of the wilderness, built for a world of constant movement and crushing scarcity. Picture a day in the life of an ancestor from the late Paleolithic, perhaps 20,000 years ago, in the shadow of the Pyrenees. The air is a sharpened blade of cold, smelling of pine needles and the distant metallic tang of the glaciers. This traveler does not know where his next meal will come from. He spends his hours in a state of rhythmic, purposeful motion, his body a masterpiece of endurance. He tracks the migration of the reindeer for miles over uneven ground, his joints absorbing the shock of the flint-strewn earth. When he finds a source of energy, a rare windfall of fat-rich marrow, or the hidden sweetness of a winter berry, his body treats it with the reverence due to a miracle. The silent errors in his code, those ancient accidents of metabolism, ensure that not a single calorie is wasted. His insulin is a precise gatekeeper, ushering the sugars into the safety of his tissues with a speed born of desperation. For him, health is the ability to store. His survival is measured in his capacity to hold on to the sun's bounty. To be lean in his world is to be vulnerable, to be one cold snap away from the great sleep. Now contrast this with the experience of his descendant in the modern age, sitting in the soft blue light of a television screen as the clock strikes midnight. The air is a constant 72 degrees. The wind is a sound heard only through double-paned glass. The hunger that strikes now is not the hollow structural ache of the Pleistocene, but an echo, a neurological ghost of that ancestor on the tundra. When we reach for a calorie-dense snack in the silence of the night, we are not being greedy. We are responding to a biological command that is older than language. Our brain is sounding an alarm, whispering that the winter is coming, that the herds have moved on, and that we must hoard while the opportunity exists. Our thrifty genes do not understand the grocery store. They do not comprehend the refrigerator. They only understand the risk of the great empty. This is the evolutionary duality of our existence. The very adaptation that allowed us to conquer the planet is now the weight we carry in a world that has finally become too easy. The biography of the body tells a story of survival versus vulnerability, where the cost of our resilience is a perpetual state of metabolic preparedness. We carry a system designed for the Stone Age buffet, a world of feast and famine, into a world of permanent feast. In the ancient world, the high caloric cost of our large brains was balanced by the high physical cost of obtaining food. The equation was in equilibrium. Today, we have decoupled the effort from the reward. We have the brain that craves, but we have removed the journey that justifies the craving. The sacred economy of our biology is in a state of profound inflation. Yet, we must look upon this vestige with a sense of wonder and compassion rather than judgment. Every cell of your body is a descendant of a survivor. You are the product of an unbroken chain of individuals who were efficient enough to stay alive when the world turned to white. Your body is not working against you. It is working for an ancestor who is no longer there, performing a duty of protection that was once the highest form of love and preservation. Generations faded into dust, the ice retreated, and the great land bridges were swallowed by the rising seas, but the machinery remained. We see it in the way our bodies still respond to the shortening of days in the autumn, a deep-seated impulse to huddle, to seek comfort, and to store energy for a season of darkness that our technology has effectively banished. This is the Antarctica of the mind, a psychological vestige of the Ice Age. We are built for movement, for the long-distance trek, the climb, and the heavy lift, yet our environment invites us to be still. This stillness creates a tension within our physiology, a confusion of the ancient code. The body asks, "Where is the hunt? Where is the cold?" And receiving no answer, it continues to do the only thing it knows. It prepares. It builds the reservoir. It cushions the core. It waits for the famine that its history tells it is inevitable. As you lie in the stillness of your room tonight, feel the weight of your own breath, the steady, rhythmic pulse of a heart that was forged in the fires of the Paleolithic. You are a biological masterpiece of endurance, a vessel designed to cross continents and outlast glaciers. The vestige of the hunter-gatherer is not a burden to be loathed, but a sacred inheritance to be understood. It is a living museum of your family's triumph over the void. In the quiet of the night, your metabolism is still tending the internal hearth, still guarding the flame of your life with the same ferocity it did in the caves of Lascaux. You are the child of the wilderness, safe in a world of abundance, carrying the equipment of a hero into the dreams of a peaceful night. The frost may not be coming for you, but you are ready for it nonetheless, protected by the golden alchemy of a flesh that remembers how to survive. The world was once a theater of constant rhythmic motion, a place where the stillness of the body was a precursor to death or the rare, hard-won sanctuary of a dreamless sleep. To understand the profound quiet of our current era, we must first listen to the echoes of the world we left behind, a world where the silence was not found in the absence of work, but in the focused tension of the hunt. Imagine, if you will, the vast undulating grasslands of the Pleistocene, a landscape where the horizon was a call to action and the wind was a choreographer of survival. Here, the human form was a character defined by its kinetic energy. We were creatures of the long march, nomadic spirits whose lives were measured in the miles traveled between the rising of the sun and the first appearance of the stars. In this ancient theater, our metabolism was an active participant in a high-stakes drama, a vigilant guardian that sat at the center of a web of constant physical demand. Every heartbeat was a calculation, every breath a preparation for the next climb, the next run, the next endurance of the elements. It was a time of deep time and biological wonder, where the body lived in a state of perfect, albeit brutal, conversation with the earth. But today, we have entered a new epoch, one characterized by a hush that our ancestors would have found alien, perhaps even terrifying. In the hush of the modern night, as we lay in our soft beds, cocooned by temperature-controlled air and shielded from the elements by walls of brick and glass, our metabolism continues its ancient work. It is a tireless, invisible character, still reading the same script it was given 300,000 years ago in the Great Rift Valley. It monitors the blood with the precision of a master alchemist. It manages the golden stores of our fat with the meticulousness of a Stone Age treasurer. And it waits. It waits for the signal that has defined our species since we first stood upright, the signal to run, to climb, or to endure. But the signal rarely comes. We have entered a period of biological stillness that is entirely new in the history of life on this planet. Our bodies, designed by the rigors of the hunt and the long march across continents, are now tasked with the quiet management of a sedentary existence. This stillness creates a tension within our cells, a confusion of the ancient code that once allowed us to conquer the world. Picture, if you will, a day in the life of an ancestor from the late Paleolithic, a wanderer crossing the land bridge of Beringia. The air is a sharpened edge of ice, smelling of frozen minerals and the distant musk-heavy scent of the mammoth. For this traveler, stillness is a luxury bought with immense effort. His day begins with movement. His body must generate heat before the sun even touches the horizon. He walks for hours, his joints absorbing the rhythmic shock of the tundra, his muscles burning through the fats stored during the last successful kill. His metabolism is in its element here. It is a master of the long burn, uncoupling energy to keep his core warm and his brain alert. To him, the body is a weapon and a tool, a vessel that is constantly being emptied and refilled. When he finally sits by the fire at night, the silence of his body is earned. His cells are not confused. They are exhausted, entering a state of repair that is as vital as the movement itself. Now contrast this with the experience of his descendant in the modern age. As we sit at desks or recline in the soft embrace of upholstery, the silent errors in our code, those ancient accidents of metabolism that allowed us to hoard energy, are still firing. The body, ever faithful to its evolutionary history, asks the same questions it has asked for millennia. Where is the cold? Where is the climb? Where is the predator that requires the sudden burst of cortisol and the flooding of the muscles with glucose? In the absence of an answer, in the void left by our sedentary lives, the body continues to do the only thing it knows how to do with high efficiency. It stores. This is the biography of the body in an era of stasis, a character that is overprepared for a play that has been canceled. The cost of our modern comfort is a metabolic dissonance, a silent internal struggle where our cells wait for a physical demand that never arrives, leading them to build higher and higher the walls of our internal reservoirs. The evolutionary duality of this trait is a study in adaptation versus cost. Our ability to survive without constant movement was once our greatest strength. It allowed us to bridge the gaps between hunts, to wait out the blizzard in the back of a cave, and to survive the great empty of a seasonal famine. It was a beautiful storative system that gave us the freedom to rest. But in a world where the search for food has been replaced by the mere reaching of a hand, this adaptation has become a burden. We are like grand oceanic ships designed to weather the most violent storms of the Southern Ocean, now moored in a shallow, windless pond. The hull remains strong, the ballast remains heavy, but the lack of movement allows the salt and the barnacles of metabolic syndrome to gather on our sides. We are learning that the stillness we once craved as a survival mechanism is now the very thing we must learn to navigate with a new kind of wisdom. Scientific discovery has begun to peel back the layers of this confusion, revealing the ancient accidents that rewrote our destiny. We see how our muscles, when left in a state of chronic inactivity, begin to send different signals to the brain. The myokines, those chemical messengers of movement, grow quiet. In their place, the adipokines of the storage tissues take over the conversation, whispering to the hypothalamus that the world is one of eternal abundance and that the thrifty genes should continue their work without ceasing. This is not a failure of our biology, but a testament to its tenacity. The body is not broken, it is merely too good at being what it was designed to be, a survivor of the Pleistocene. We see this legacy in the way our blood sugar rises in anticipation of a hunt that never happens, and in the way our hearts beat with the stress of a predator that is now only a deadline or a glowing screen. Historical world-building shows us that this transition occurred in the blink of an evolutionary eye. From the Neolithic Revolution to the Industrial Age, the physical demands on the human form plummeted while the availability of calories skyrocketed. In Doggerland, a hunter might have walked 20 miles a day just to find a reliable source of fresh water and protein. Today, we might not walk 20 miles in a week. Yet, beneath our clothing, the marrow and the fat are still tuned to the frequency of the tundra. The body remembers the crunch of snow and the texture of flint. It remembers the fear of the dark and the warmth of the first fire. It is a living museum of a more active time, carrying the equipment of a long-distance runner into the cubicle and the car. We are the architects of our own stillness, yet we are inhabited by spirits of movement. Every time we choose to walk when we could ride, or to lift when we could be still, we are speaking a language our metabolism understands. We are providing the answer to the ancient question of the cells. We are telling the body that the climb is here, that the horizon is still calling, and that the stores do not need to be quite so high. We are learning to navigate this new landscape, not with the spear or the digging stick, but with a poetic understanding of our own ancient rhythms. It is a sacred unveiling of our own origins, a realization that to be healthy in a sedentary age is to intentionally reenact the hardships of our ancestors. We must simulate the hunt. We must invite the cold. We must find the climb in a world that tries to flatten every path. As you drift now towards sleep, feel the weight of your body as it sinks into the mattress. This is the stillness your ancestors dreamed of during the long, freezing nights of the Ice Age. For them, this moment of absolute rest was the goal of all their labor. Enjoy the biological peace that they fought so hard to secure for their descendants. But as you sleep, know that your metabolism is still at its post, a faithful sentry guarding the internal hearth. It is monitoring the treasures of your blood and the golden reserves of your skin, preparing you for a morning that it hopes will bring the signal to move. You are a creature of the wilderness, resting in a palace of your own making. The silence of the sedentary age is your sanctuary, but the fire of the Pleistocene still burns in the deep, quiet spaces of your being, ready to ignite whenever you decide to answer the call of the horizon once more. Rest in the knowledge that your body is a masterpiece of adaptation, a vessel that has survived the harshest environments the earth has ever produced. The duality of your existence, the ancient hunter living in a world of stillness, is a beautiful, poetic irony that you carry in every cell. Let the rhythmic pulse of your heart be a reminder that the march is not over. It has merely changed its pace. The night is long, the bed is soft, and the ancient code is at peace, waiting for the dawn and the return of the light. The world was once a theater of shadows, a vast and whispering expanse where the setting of the sun was not merely a transition of light, but a descent into a kingdom of teeth and cold. Imagine, if you will, the Paleolithic night, a darkness so absolute it felt like a physical weight against the skin. In this primeval theater, the air carried the scent of damp earth, the sharp, resinous tang of pine, and the distant, terrifying musk of predators that saw perfectly in the void. For our ancestors, the night was a time of profound vulnerability, a stretch of hours where the human spirit was tested by the silence of the forest and the biting chill of the Pleistocene. To survive these hours required more than just the shelter of a cave or the companionship of the tribe. It required a biological strategy that looked ahead to the dawn. In the quiet of the modern night, when we find ourselves wandering toward the kitchen in the hush of a sleeping house, we are not merely seeking a snack. We are reenacting an ancient ritual. We are listening to the memory of the midnight meal, a character in our biological biography that has carried the torch of survival through the darkest eons of our history. There is a specific kind of hunger that strikes in the dead of night, a craving that is dense, urgent, and strangely sustaining. This is not a modern failing of the will, nor is it a glitch in our sophisticated dietary plans. It is a ghost of the Stone Age. It is the sensory echo of 1,000 generations who sat around the dying embers of a fire, sharing the last bit of fatty marrow or a handful of oil-rich nuts saved specifically for the darkest hour. In the deep time of our evolution, our biology learned a hard and necessary lesson, that the night is long and the morning is never a guarantee. To go to sleep with an empty stomach was to risk the inner flame flickering out before the sun could return to replenish it. This midnight nourishment was the biological equivalent of stoking the furnace, a way to ensure the metabolism had the fuel to keep the heart beating and the limbs warm against the rising damp of the primeval world. Picture, if you will, a small band of humans 40,000 years ago nestled in the lee of a limestone cliff in the valley of the Reservoir. The fire, once a roaring beast that kept the shadows at bay, has dwindled to a pulsating red eye in the center of the camp. The air is so cold it turns the breath into ghosts. A young man, perhaps the primary tracker for his kin, stirs from a shallow sleep. He feels the hollow ache in his midsection, a gnawing reminder that his body is burning through its meager stores just to keep his temperature above the freezing point. He reaches into a woven pouch and finds a fragment of bone, cracked open earlier that evening. He scrapes the last of the fatty, gray marrow onto his tongue. The texture is rich, the flavor intense and metallic. As he swallows, he feels a wave of warmth spread through his chest, a chemical promise of safety. This was not a meal of pleasure, but a strategic investment in the following day. By eating now, in the silence of the midnight watch, he ensures that he will have the strength to wake, to hunt, and to protect his family when the first gray light touches the horizon. This behavior, once a vital survival strategy, is now a whisper from a bygone era, an emotionally resonant connection to the billions of humans who came before us. When we feel that pull toward the pantry in the silence of a modern suburb, we are hearing the echo of an ancestor who knew that a full stomach was the best defense against the predatory shadows. The silent errors in our code, the mutations that favored those who sought caloric density in the dark, have become a permanent part of our neural architecture. Our brains are wired with a prehistoric map of reward, one where the combination of fat and stillness equals survival. The evolutionary duality of this trait is a study in adaptation versus mismatch. The cost of this ancient wisdom is our modern struggle with excess. But the survival it granted us is the reason we are here to contemplate it. We are never truly alone in our cravings. We are accompanied by the shadows of 1,000 generations who ate to stay alive so that we might one day eat for pleasure. In the biography of the body, the midnight meal is the character that represents our deepest fears and our most profound resilience. It is the trait that understands the great empty better than any other. During the Neolithic Revolution, when we began to tame the earth and store our grain in stone bins, the midnight hunger did not vanish. It merely adapted. The farmer, waking to the sound of a predator in the fold or the first signs of a summer storm, would reach for a piece of dried fruit or a crust of bread. The context had changed. The hunter had become a guardian of the soil, but the biological requirement remained the same. The body still demanded a buffer against the uncertainty of the night. This is the historical world-building of our metabolism. We have built a world of infinite food, but we are still inhabited by a body that remembers the drought and the frost. Scientific discovery tells us that this nocturnal drive is linked to the complex dance of leptin and ghrelin, the hormones of satiety and hunger that we have explored in previous chapters. But it is also linked to the ancient architecture of the hypothalamus, the part of the brain that regulates our most primal urges. In the silence of the genome, the instructions for nocturnal foraging were written during the era when we were small, nocturnal mammals hiding from the dinosaurs. When we became the masters of the day, we did not discard our nighttime heritage. We repurposed it. We turned the midnight meal into a social anchor, a moment of communal bonding where the stories of the tribe were told in whispers over the last morsels of the day's catch. The smell of wood smoke and the taste of salt were the sensory anchors of our collective identity. Generations faded into dust, the great glaciers of the Ice Age melted into the sea, and the land bridges we once walked were swallowed by the rising tides. Yet, the memory of the marrow remained. It remained through the rise of cities, through the invention of the electric light that banished the true dark, and into the era of the modern refrigerator. We are like travelers who have finally reached a land of eternal sun, yet we still carry the heavy coats and the emergency rations of the winter we left behind. This is the poetic irony of our existence. The very thing that ensured our survival in the caves of Lascaux is now the thing that challenges our health in the age of abundance. But we must look upon this craving with a sense of wonder. It is a biological bridge, a way for us to touch the hands of the ancestors who sat in the same darkness, feeling the same pangs, and finding the same solace in the act of nourishment. Every time you find yourself standing in the cool glow of the refrigerator light at 2 a.m., take a moment to acknowledge the ghost at your shoulder. You are participating in a lineage of endurance. You are responding to an ancient internal clock that has been ticking since the first human looked at the moon and wondered if they would see the sun again. The food you seek is different, perhaps a slice of cheese or a spoonful of nut butter, but the intent is identical. You are stoking the fire. You are honoring the sacred economy of the brain by ensuring the gray master has the glucose it needs to weave your dreams. You are a child of the wilderness, safe in a world of glass, but still carrying the wisdom of the bone and the hearth. As you drift back toward sleep, Let the feeling of satiety be your lullaby. The memory of the midnight meal has done its duty. It has reminded you of your connection to the deep past and provided the comfort required to surrender to the great sleep. You are warm, you are safe, and you are fed. The predatory shadows of the Pleistocene are gone, replaced by the soft hum of the modern world. But the resilience that saw your ancestors through the night is still very much alive within you. Sleep now, knowing that you are the culmination of 1,000,000 successful nights. A living torch carried forward by the strength of those who ate in the dark so that you could dream in the light. The world, as we have come to know it, is a fleeting thinness, a mere moment of stillness in a biography that spans the rise and fall of mountain ranges and the slow, rhythmic drifting of the continents. To understand the true nature of our survival, we must cast our gaze back into the deep, breathing shadows of the Pleistocene, a world where the horizon was a jagged promise of either death or discovery. Imagine, if you will, the Earth at its most raw, a theater of vast, wind-swept steppes, where the mammoth held court and the sky was a bruised indigo, heavy with the threat of 1,000-year frost. In this primeval landscape, our ancestors were not the masters of their environment, but its most resilient students. They lived in the silence of the Great Rift Valley, witnessing the slow drying of the ancient forests, and they stood on the edges of the Beringian land bridge, feeling the metallic tang of the glaciers on their tongues. This was the crucible of the human spirit, a time of deep time and biological wonder, where a subtle shift in our internal alchemy was preparing us to become the ultimate wanderers of the globe. As we look toward the shifting horizons of the future, we must begin to view our biological heritage not as a burden of ancient cravings, but as a masterpiece of evolutionary engineering, a testament to an incredible, unwavering resilience. We are the living survivors of an unbroken chain of life, a lineage that weathered the drying of the ancestral forests and the freezing of the poles without ever letting the inner flame flicker out. This ability to store and use energy is not merely a metabolic function, it is a sacred character in our story, a silent witness to every hardship our kin ever faced. It is a system as beautiful as it is complex, carved into our very bones and woven into the softest tissues of our flesh. It was the biological engine that allowed us to spread across the globe, inhabiting every climate from the sun-scorched dunes of the Sahara to the crystalline silence of the high Arctic. It was the fuel that powered the migration of the spirit, just as much as it powered the migration of the feet, proving that we are a species defined by an inner heat that no winter, however long or metaphorical, can ever truly extinguish. Picture, if you will, a day in the life of a traveler 50,000 years ago, standing at the edge of the Toba ash clouds. The air is thick with the gray soot of a volcanic winter, and the sun has been a mere ghost in the sky for months. The plants are dying, and the animals have fled or perished in the gloom. In this great empty, the human spirit is tested by the most fundamental question of existence. Can we endure? Our traveler sits in the lee of a jagged rock, his breath misting in the dim light. He has not seen a ripening fruit or a fresh track in 10 suns. Yet, beneath his skin, the silent error in his code, that ancient accident of the thrifty metabolism, is performing its most heroic task. His body is dismantling the golden reservoirs of his fat, releasing a steady, controlled stream of energy that keeps his heart beating with a quiet, stubborn rhythm. He is not just surviving, he is holding a position against the void. This resilience is a physical manifestation of a successful hunt from a moon ago, a debt paid by the past to ensure the continuity of the future. This internal furnace provided more than just warmth, it provided the courage to move. Because our ancestors carried their own summer within them, they were not tethered to the warmth of the equator. They could afford the metabolic risk of curiosity. Imagine the first band of humans to crest the mountain passes of the Altai, looking down into a world of snow and ice that their DNA had never before encountered. To any other primate, this was a graveyard. But to the human, equipped with the architecture of the Stone Age buffet, it was a frontier. The duality of our nature, the vulnerability of our naked skin, and the strength of our internal fuel meant that we could adapt to any terrain. We became the only creatures capable of dreaming of the stars while standing in the mud. Our intelligence, fueled by the sacred economy of the brain, allowed us to invent the needle, the spear, and the torch, but it was the metabolic resilience beneath those inventions that kept the blood flowing through the hands that held them. Scientific discovery often speaks of genetics in the dry language of sequences and base pairs, but in the biography of the body, these are ancient accidents that rewrote our destiny. A mutation here, a subtle shift there, and suddenly a tropical ape possesses the capacity to live among the reindeer and the seal. This was not a calculated plan, but a series of silent whispers in the code of life that favored those who could endure the longest nights on the thinnest of margins. We see the legacy of this resilience in the way our bodies still respond to stress. When we face the metaphorical winters of our modern lives, the pressures of change, the uncertainty of the path ahead, our biology still reaches for the same tools of preservation. We are hardwired to survive. We possess the internal resources to carry on, a biological promise that was polished by the hand of time in the caves of Lascaux and on the shores of the Mediterranean. Generations faded into dust, and the glaciers that once locked the world in silence eventually retreated, leaving behind the fertile valleys where we built our first cities. But as we transitioned from the hunter-gatherer to the farmer, and eventually to the citizen of the modern age, the resilience did not vanish. It merely changed its expression. The inner heat that saw us through the Ice Age became the drive that fuels our creativity and our compassion. This is the biography of the body as a character of immense depth. It is the part of us that refuses to give up. Whether we are facing the literal ice of the past or the complexities of the digital future, we carry the same equipment that allowed our ancestors to walk from Africa to the ends of the earth. We are the children of the wilderness, and our thrifty heritage is the reason we are here to tell the tale. Consider the texture of your own life, the moments where you have felt the cold of a challenge or the famine of a loss. In those moments, you are not alone. You are accompanied by the shadows of 1,000 generations who felt the same shiver and the same hunger. Your body remembers how to find the path. It is a living museum of every drought your lineage outlasted and every mountain they climbed. The resilience is carved into the very density of your bones and the way your muscles remember the rhythm of the march. We are a species that thrives on change because we are built of the very materials that change creates. The sacred cycle of effort and reward that we have explored throughout this journey is the heartbeat of our species, a pulse that has never been extinguished, not by the ash of volcanoes, the weight of the ice, or the silence of the great empty. As you lie here now, in the stillness of your own room, feel the warmth that radiates from your skin. This is your inner heat, the biological and spiritual flame that has been passed from hand to hand, heart to heart, for 2 million years. It is a portable hearth that you carry through the world, a signal to the universe that life will not be denied. You are the product of an unbroken chain of miracles, each one a testament to the fact that we were designed to endure. The long nights of the Pleistocene are over, but the light they forced us to cultivate still burns bright within you. Rest now in the security of your own incredible architecture, knowing that you possess everything you need to face the dawn. You are the survivor, the wanderer, and the dreamer, a masterpiece of life that has already won its greatest battles against the dark. The world was once a vast and breathing architecture of shadow, a theater of elements where the only light was the fragile, pulsing amber of the wood fire and the steady, unseen glow of the blood. To understand the final movement in the biography of our species, we must travel back to the edge of the known, to the shores of the Great Ice Age, where the map of the world was written in frost and the stars felt close enough to touch. Imagine, if you will, the silence of a Paleolithic midnight, a silence so deep it rings in the ears like a bell. The glaciers, those slow blue giants, are grinding their way across the northern hemisphere, locking the moisture of the earth into a crystalline vault. The wind, a nomadic spirit from the pole, carries the scent of ancient dust and frozen cedar. In this primeval theater, our ancestors were not merely survivors. They were the architects of a new kind of warmth. They were the first to realize that the fire outside the body was only half of the story. The true flame, the eternal flame, was the one they carried stitched into the very fabric of their flesh. This was the birth of our metabolic legacy, a story of love, of preservation, and of the profound alchemy that turns the cold of the world into the heat of the soul. The story of human fat and metabolism is, ultimately, a story of collective care, a record of every sacrifice made in the dark to ensure that the dawn would find us still breathing. It is the story of parents who, in the leanest moons of the Pleistocene, gave their last morsels of energy to their children, knowing that the golden stores of their own bodies were the only bridge to the future. It is the story of tribes who shared their bounty, the rare windfall of a mammoth or the hidden oils of a mountain nut, to ensure that the weakest among them did not flicker out. Our biology is not a cold accountant. It is a living history of that preservation. Every adipose cell, every mitochondria roaring in the deep spaces of the marrow, is a testament to an unbroken chain of kindness. We are the descendants of those who looked at the encroaching ice and refused to be defeated by it. We are the children of the fire keepers, a lineage that learned how to store the sun of the summer to survive the winter of the eons. Picture, if you will, a specific night in the heart of the last glacial maximum, perhaps 25,000 years ago. A small band of humans is huddled together in a cave carved by the patience of an ancient river. Outside, the blizzard is a roaring wall of white, burying the tracks of the predators and the prey alike. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of wood smoke, the musk of damp firs, and the metallic tang of flint. A mother lies with her infant, her body acting as a living shield against the draft. As she sleeps, her metabolism is performing its most sacred duty. It is not merely keeping her alive, it is distilling the nutrients of her meager diet into a rich, life-giving milk. This milk is a miracle of energy management, a concentrated burst of lipids and sugars that will become the brown fat protecting her child's heart. This is the biography of the body as a protector. A character that takes the harshness of the environment and transforms it into the softness of the nursery. The mother's fat stores are her love made manifest in the flesh, a reservoir of endurance that ensures the lineage continues even when the earth is locked in iron. This adaptation was the silent error that rewrote our destiny, an ancient accident that allowed us to treat our own bodies as the ultimate hearth. While the great cats and the massive herbivores relied on the size of their muscles or the thickness of their coats, we developed the ability to manage the very flow of life. This was the evolutionary duality of the inner heat, a profound vulnerability in our nakedness, yet an incredible resilience in our storage. The cost was a metabolism that was perpetually on high alert, a system that demanded constant fueling to keep the brain and the core from the chill. But the adaptation was the freedom to wander. We were no longer prisoners of the tropics. We were the masters of the global stage. We carried our lost Antarctica within us, not a sunken continent of stone and myth, but a living map of survival written in our DNA. When the maps of the past show lands covered in white, the maps of our genome show a species that learned how to turn that white void into a catalyst for greatness. As the eons folded into one another and the ice began its final, agonizingly slow retreat, the humans who emerged from the caves were different from any creature that had ever walked the earth. They were travelers who had been refined by the frost, thinkers who had been fueled by the fats of the hunt, and survivors who had been preserved by the logic of the huddle. The transition from the Paleolithic to the Neolithic was not just a change in tools, but a change in the scale of our firekeeping. We began to build cities and till the earth, creating a world where the famine was finally pushed to the margins. But deep within the marrow, the old rules still applied. The body remained a meticulous treasurer, still watching the horizon for the return of the cold. Even today, in our world of perpetual summer and artificial light, we carry the same machinery. We carry the thrifty genes and the leptin lullaby, the biological echoes of a time when the midnight meal was the only thing standing between us and the void. Generations faded into dust, the great mammoth vanished into the mist of memory, and the land bridges were swallowed by the rising tides of the Holocene. Yet the trait remained, the eternal flame in the cold. It remained through the rise and fall of Rome, through the crossing of the Atlantic, and into the neon silence of the space age. We see it in the way we still seek comfort in the warmth of another, and in the way our bodies react to the shortening of the days. This is the biography of the body as an enduring protagonist, a character that has never forgotten the lessons of the Pleistocene. We are a species defined by our inner heat, a biological and spiritual flame that has survived every catastrophe the earth has ever produced. We possess the internal resources to carry on, a biological promise that was polished by the hand of necessity and the heart of the tribe. As you drift toward sleep tonight, in the security of your soft bed and the hush of your modern home, take a moment to feel the warmth of your own body. This is the subtle, constant hum of your metabolism working to keep you whole. It is the sound of 1,000,000 years of successful firekeeping. You are the culmination of an unbroken chain of survivors, each one passing the torch of life to the next through the darkest nights of history. You are carrying a legacy of deep time, a gift from the first humans who looked at the glaciers and said, "We will not be extinguished." Your fat, your blood, your very breath are the remnants of that victory. This is your sanctuary, the realization that you are built of the same resilience that outlasted the ice. The maps of the past may be frozen, but the maps of your DNA are a thriving, glowing record of triumph. You are safe. The hearth within you is burning bright, fueled by the wisdom of the ancestors and the alchemy of your own flesh. You do not need to fear the dark, for you carry the sun of 1,000 summers in the deep, quiet spaces of your being. The morning will come, just as it always has, found by the same internal light that guided our kin across the tundra. Rest now in the profound peace of your own biology. Let the rhythmic pulse of your heart be your lullaby, a reminder that the fire is tended, the stores are secure, and you are part of a story that will never truly end. The eternal flame is yours to hold, and in the silence of the night, it is enough.